Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. Happy Monday. How do you guys like my new set? Just kidding. I'm on the road. I'm traveling. I'm in sunny San Diego, California, my favorite place on earth. I was speaking at the Young America's Foundation Freedom Con on Saturday. It was a phenomenal event. If you guys haven't checked them out, you definitely should. We're here for a couple more days, so we're filming on the road, which makes it always a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more personal to connect with you. We have some crazy stuff to talk about on the show today. Really banana stuff. I want to start today with this article that I have read probably 5 times. I can't stop reading this because is it true? Is it mainstream media propaganda, or is it an intelligence psyop? We're going to go through exactly what this story is and how to analyze it. So the title of this article from Axios is called Exclusive Inside Trump's Iran Fear. And it says, Iran's threat to assassinate Donald Trump during the 2024 campaign was far more serious than publicly known and led to extraordinary precautions by his team that included using a decoy plane to avert a feared attempt on his life. Now, the guy writing this, I will say, the guy writing this article has a book about this, so he is pumping up his book, but it's still interesting. He said, Iran is clearly still on Trump's mind. Last week, he said he'd given his team instructions to obliterate Iran if operatives were to kill him. You remember that. We talked about that on the show last week. This is, in my opinion, this is best Trump when he's saying, listen, if they kill me, it's bad, not for me, but for them, because I've given instructions to obliterate them if they do that. Axios says he later tempered that remark by saying he wanted a, quote, verified nuclear peace agreement with Iran, which has targeted Trump since 2020 when, as president, he ordered an airstrike that killed Qasem Soleimani, a top Iranian military leader. So the author says, for this book, which is set to release March 18th, I was given extensive access to Trump's inner circle during his campaign. Law enforcement officials warned Trump last year that Tehran had placed operatives here in the United States with access to surface-to-air missiles. By the way, that means you could stand on the ground, fire these missiles, and they would take down an airliner. That's what surface-to-air missiles are. Trump's team worried that the Iranians could try to down his easily recognizable personal jet, better known as Trump Force One, as it was taking off or landing. The concern intensified after a foiled assassination attempt of Trump at his golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida on September 15th. At one point, soon after the Florida incident, Trump's security detail was concerned enough about the Iran threat that it had Trump travel to an event on a decoy plane owned by Steve Witkoff. He's a Trump friend and a real estate executive who's now Trump's envoy to the Middle East. Much of Trump's staff traveled on Trump Force One that day, infuriating some aides who worried that they would be, quote, collateral damage if the jet were shot down. Co-campaign manager Susie Wiles, who is now White House chief of staff, and Chris LaCivita decided to split up. Wiles traveled on Witkoff's plane with Trump, while LaCivita joined staffers on Trump Force One. Okay, we're going to stop there for just a second. So, don't you wonder if this is true? Obviously, the guy writing this article has a book coming out, and he's not friendly to Trump. I think that's fair to say, not too friendly. But here's the thing. We know that Iran does have operatives here in the United States who want to assassinate Trump. So there's 3 options when it comes to this story. Option number 1 is that this is 100% true, that there are not only Iranian operatives who are trying to assassinate Trump, but that Trump is living in fear of them, so much so that he used his staff as essentially bait. Go on my plane, and if the Iranians actually successfully assassinate me, they'll get you. That's where I'm a little wary of saying that this is true. That doesn't seem to be quite accurate. So the second option is that this could be the mainstream media trying to make Trump look bad. Axios, not exactly as objective as they portray themselves to be, saying, well, let's portray Trump as being kind of weak, kind of frightened. Or third option, and this is the most likely option in my opinion, that this is the intelligence community feeding information to Axios in order to try to foment war with Iran. Because we know that these uniparty warmongers have wanted us to bomb the heck out of Iran for a long time. You remember the John Bolton era. They want nothing more than for us to be have American boots on the ground in Iran to obliterate Iran. And here's the thing. Something does actually need to be done about Iran. There's no serious person that's saying that nothing should be done. This is a nation who wants to wipe us off the face of the earth. They think that we're the great Satan, and they're trying to acquire a nuclear weapon to make that dream a reality. So it is unwise to sit back and be a complete isolationist, to just say, well, unless they come here to the United States, we're not going to do anything about it. It's not a binary option between isolationism and being a neocon. you can say, actually, we should probably figure out a way to make sure that Iran does not get their hands on a nuclear weapon without endorsing a forever war, without endorsing American boots on the ground in Iran. There is actually a reasonable, common sense position that is neither isolationism or neoconism. However, this article I thought was very interesting for two reasons. One, it is always interesting, at least the idea of having an inside look at the Trump campaign or the Trump administration now. And really any politician, you get this behind the scenes look. It's interesting. It's kind of gossipy, kind of interesting. But the other reason that it's interesting is because think about what we've been talking about for the past 2 weeks. Elon Musk is doging U.S. aid. U.S. aid being ostensibly the U.S. Agency for International Development, but really a front for CIA color revolutions and regime changes around the world. And the intel community at large is freaking out. Like, freaking out, because this was the nexus of not only everything that they were doing around the world, it was the nexus, all of that political warcraft, if you will, that they were aiming at foreign countries, which sometimes we don't care about as much. They had turned on us. It was the nexus of the censorship industrial complex that was aimed at us, saying that, and things that we were saying were a threat to democracy. Well, that's the language they used when they would justify these regime changes around the world. But since Elon has taken aim at U.S. aid, and by the way, thanks to your voice in support of or bringing light to all the corruption at U.S. aid, this is a very successful venture of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. The intelligence agencies are not going to take this lying down, is the material point here. They're not going to simply roll over and be like, okay, you won, we lost, we're going to stop trying to take you out, we're going to relinquish our power, we're going to give up our treasure chests of money that we've made by staging wars all around the world. No. This is far from over when it comes to the battle between the intelligence community and the U.S. Citizenry, or you and me, voters in the United States. In fact, we can see exactly what the intelligence community is doing to try to get back at Trump if we look at what the FBI is doing right now. The FBI is leaking classified information to mainstream media outlets to try to get back at Trump. And one of the biggest leaks is coming, about ICE raids, about immigration raids across the country. We're going to get to that in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about being debanked. Do you know what it means to be debanked? It means that your bank, or a bank that you went to and said, hey, I want to open a checking account, would say, no, you, Liz Wheeler, cannot open a checking account because you voted for Donald Trump, because you are part of the Make America Great movement, because you do not like, Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or whoever it might be. Or being debanked is even worse. You have your money in a bank and the bank says you have to remove and withdraw all your money within 24 hours. Otherwise, we're going to confiscate it because we think you're a hateful, bigoted, xenophobic, racist, whatever their insult of the week is, person. And you're left with what? Are you supposed to walk out of the bank with all your money? Well, listen, these leftists, and especially the globalists, are going to continue to seek to control you. And the way that they can control you best is by controlling your money. So I highly recommend you do what I did, which is invest a portion of your wealth portfolio in physical gold and silver. If you have that physical gold and silver, you are not as controllable as if your money is in the bank. So I highly recommend you call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They will help you diversify your wealth portfolio into physical gold and silver, and they're a fabulous company. They stand next to us. They support this show because we are committed to bringing you the truth, as are they. So call them now. You can click the link in the description of this episode, or you can call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866-996-5172, or text Liz to 998899. And by the way, tell them that I sent you, and they'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Can't beat that. Make sure you click that link in the description. Okay, so what is the FBI up to now? We are just days away from Kash Patel being confirmed as the new FBI director. Cannot wait. His committee vote, he has to be voted out of committee first before there's a full confirmation vote of the entire Senate. The committee vote is happening on Thursday. This Thursday. Was going to happen last week, but the Senate, they love to make every procedure more complicated than it needs to be. Before Kash is confirmed as Senate, the FBI is still out of control, and they've been leaking information about upcoming ICE raids to media outlets who are publishing that information, essentially warning illegal aliens, hey, the feds are coming for you. So for example, the LA Times reported on upcoming ICE raids, not one, not two, multiple ICE raids that are happening in California, in Los Angeles, and in other locations. And Kristi Noem, Secretary of Homeland Security, responded to this. And it's kind of an open secret, by the way, at least in Washington, D.C., that this is coming from the FBI, these leaks. It's not just, oh, someone got wind of it. It's a deliberate leak from the FBI. Secretary Kristi Noem said the FBI is so corrupt. We will work with any and every agency to stop leaks and prosecute these crooked deep state agents to the fullest extent of the law. And newly sworn in Attorney General Pam Bondi echoed that. She said she had a message for, ICE raid leakers saying, we will find you and we will prosecute you. And I would just like to take a moment and compare what this second Trump administration is like compared to the first one. The first Trump administration was great, don't get me wrong, but this is a completely different mindset. The strategies and the tactics, the tools that the swamp is using to try to not just deter Trump, but destroy him, it's not working this time because Trump and all the people that he's put in these positions of power around him are aware of what those tactics are and aware of what those strategies, and they're just not having it. They're saying, okay, I see exactly what you're doing, and I'm not just going to go on X and whine about it. I'm not just going to go on Fox News and whine about it. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to prosecute you. And this is exactly what I like to see. So Kash Patel should be confirmed as FBI director on Thursday night. Make sure you reach out to your senator. Make sure you send an email, a text message, blow up their phone lines. When I say blow up, I mean call a lot, not actual physical violence. Make sure they hear from you that you want Kash Patel confirmed as quickly as possible. Don't let them be distracted by the lobbyists and by the mainstream media fake news. Tell them you want Kash confirmed. Some other Senate confirmations that are going to, God willing, happen this week. Tulsi Gabbard there's going to be a cloture vote on Tulsi Gabbard as DNI. That should happen either tonight or tomorrow night, depending on the Senate. And then after Tulsi's confirmation vote, RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., should have a full confirmation vote. We don't know exactly the time and the date of that yet. We know it's going to come after Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation. That one, of course, is, in my opinion, the most critical of the three, not because he's the most important person, but because his is the most tenuous. There are more even Republican senators who are squishy on RFK than on Kash or on Tulsi. So I know we really lit up the phone lines last week. So let's do that again, just to make sure. I almost feel, how last week we did that episode after he got out of committee? We did almost a celebratory episode because it was like, can you believe that Cassidy actually voted to advance RFK out of committee? Well, now, days later, I'm like, oh, did we celebrate too soon? Was that, did we feel good about that victory getting him out of the committee only to face, we don't know yet what yet on the floor of the Senate? I hope not. I hope that was, I think I gave it on the show last week. I think I said it was a 95% chance that he would be fully confirmed since he got out of committee. And I guess I still feel that it's 95%, but I don't like waiting. That's the crux of it. I don't like waiting. So make sure you let your senator know that if she doesn't vote for RFK Jr.'s full confirmation, then they're not going to be long in the Senate because we're gonna make sure that they lose their seat of power and all their money. Okay, so President Trump is responding to the intelligence community continuing to try to fight back against him by stripping security clearances from high-ranking politicians. I think this is so savage and so based. We're going to get into that in just a second. But you know what I think an interesting case study is that we should all be paying attention to? Ivermectin. What happened in 2020? In 2020, we were told that this COVID virus was going to get us all, and we were told that there was nothing that could treat it except the vaccine. But then we found out actually ivermectin helps a lot against the COVID virus. So we all were like, okay, let's get ivermectin. I had family members who took ivermectin when they got COVID, but then we had doctors, we had pharmacists, we certainly had politicians, we had public health officials telling us not only that ivermectin was a horse drug or whatever they called it, but that we weren't allowed to access it. We weren't allowed to get it, even though it had efficacy against this virus that was supposed to kill us. And I cannot with that. I cannot tolerate when someone who has a political motive tries to tell me what I have to do or what I cannot do with my health. And so here's the thing. This playbook that the left wrote during COVID and with ivermectin, this is not going to be an isolated experience. It's going to happen again in some format. And I don't want to be left in a position like I was in 2020 where there's something that can help me and I don't have access to it. And so I'd like to introduce you to All Family Pharmacy. All Family Pharmacy, I mean, at the heart of what All Family Pharmacy does is the Make America Healthy Again movement, which is a call to take control of your own health and prepare for the unexpected. All Family Pharmacy has over 200 different medications and bundled emergency packages to ensure that you are ready for anything, even if we don't know exactly what it's going to be or when it's going to drop. I highly recommend that you check out allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. By the way, if you find yourself in a pinch ever, All Family Pharmacy has you covered with overnight delivery. That is the kind of care and convenience I expect from those who are partaking or those partners that I have in my own healthcare. Don't wait for the next crisis to strike. Be proactive, be prepared. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz and use my code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Okay. Over the weekend, President Trump stripped the security clearance of Joe Biden. Yeah, of Joe Biden. And there are some on the left and even some squishy people on the right. They're like, oh, that's disrespectful to take security clearance away from a former president. They're totally wrong. And here's why. First of all, Biden set the precedent for this by discontinuing the security briefings for Trump after Trump left office. The way that it usually works is when a president leaves office, they are entitled to the privilege of continuing to have access to classified information, and not just like in a vague, nebulous sense, like, oh, if you happen to trip upon some classified information. They have people from the intelligence apparatus brief them as often as they want on the things that they were dealing with when they were in office, because they're part of an exclusive club, right? They're the presidents of the United States. There's still value in them being in the know, unless you're Joe Biden. But before we even get to the Biden thing, when Trump left office, Joe Biden, the incoming president at the time, took away Trump's intel briefings. He was no longer given access to classified information. And so Trump now has stripped Biden's security clearance, but it's actually not just a tit for tat, which I'd probably be fine with if it was, but it's not just a tit for tat, because here's the thing. When you think about the Biden family crime syndicate, you think about Hunter Biden being the bag man, Joe Biden sending him abroad to these terrible places, you know, the corrupt oligarchs in Ukraine or communist China, and making deals, selling access to Joe Biden, and in return, Hunter Biden was paid these millions and millions upon millions of dollars. Well, there's one part that has never been fully explained in that story, and that is, okay, if Hunter Biden was selling access to Joe Biden when Joe was vice president, okay, Joe Biden had access to making serious decisions on behalf of the United States. I get that. But what about those 4 years when Trump was president before Biden was president? Why would there be any value in these corrupt foreign adversaries paying Hunter for access to Joe Biden if Joe Biden was just at that point a private citizen? He wasn't in the Senate, he wasn't vice president, and he wasn't yet president. So what would be the value in these terrible people paying Hunter for access to Joe? Well, I'll tell you what the value of that is. It's because presidents and vice presidents retain their security clearance, they retain their access to classified information, and they retain these security briefings. So it's not just a matter of buying access to a sitting vice president or a sitting president, it's about getting information from them. So you are, for example, Hunter Biden going to Ukraine or going on Air Force Two with Joe Biden when he was vice president to China. You know, these foreign adversaries then have access to Joe after he left office, and he can still give them all the information that he has ongoing access to, which may be even more valuable to them with Joe out of office, because think about communist China. They didn't know what to think during Trump's first presidency because Trump is unpredictable. He's not like any politician or any American president they've ever faced. But if Joe Biden had security clearance and access to these intel briefings, an insider look into what Trump was doing with our national security, then it's worth every penny that they gave Hunter to have access to Joe, who basically had access to behind the scenes of what Trump was doing. So when Trump strips Biden of his security clearance, it's not just a vindictive tit for tat. It's not just a, well, you stripped mine, I'm going to strip yours, ha ha ha, I'm in power again. This is actually a tactical move, and a very strategic tactical move, a smart tactical move, because do you think for a second that Biden is going to stop with his pay-to-play scheme since he got away with it? I don't think so. I don't think so. Trump also stripped security clearance from Anthony Blinken. Well, Anthony Blinken is Biden's right-hand man. So you remember the UPenn Center where all of that classified documents, all the classified documents were found at Biden's center at the University of Pennsylvania. That was all Anthony Blinken. So he's an intricate part of this Biden crime stuff. So it's, again, not just a tit for tat like, oh, I don't like Anthony Blinken. This is getting people associated with Biden's crime pay-to-play schemes, getting them away from the information that could possibly hurt them. Trump also stripped security clearance from Letitia James and from Alvin Bragg. And again, you can sit here, and I wouldn't blame you if you felt this way, because I feel this way a little bit. You can sit here and be like, haha, you tried to get me and you failed, and so now I'm gonna take power away from you. That's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling that way. But these two people also seriously abused their power when they are in office, but they seriously abused their power, and they shouldn't have access to information that they can leak to mainstream media outlets that are constantly staging propaganda against Trump. Jake Sullivan also lost his security clearance, as did Biden's Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. Lisa Monaco, by the way, it should be remembered, she was one of the intel agents or the intel officers that signed that letter back in 2020. Remember when social media, well, of course you remember this, when social media was censoring the Hunter Biden laptop story, and those intel officials signed that letter, and it was like 50 intel chiefs say this looks like Russian disinformation. And that was used as justification for censoring that story on Facebook and on Twitter at the time. Lisa Monaco was one of the people that signed that. And it later turned out, obviously, to be complete fake news. And they all knew it was fake news when they signed it. It was just propaganda. Well, she was one of the ones that signed it. So yeah, bam, get rid of that security clearance. Also, Merrick Garland was put as Biden's attorney general because he has this like soft looking demeanor. He like portrayed himself when Obama nominated him to the Supreme Court. Remember that? Right before Trump won in 2016. And he was supposed to be a centrist. He was supposed to be middling. He was supposed to be, not ideological one way or the other. And clearly that hasn't turned out to be the case. But one of the reasons that hasn't been the case is because Lisa Monaco is his number 2. And he's essentially just the centrist, soft-looking camouflage for Lisa Monaco. So yeah, her security clearance should go bye-bye. And then Andrew Weissman, Mark Zaid, and Norm Eisen, those are attorneys that have been highly intricately involved in the lawfare against Trump. They also had their clearances revoked. I think it's great. I don't think that Republicans should try to compromise for the sake of compromise. There's no virtue in compromise itself when what you are compromising is justice versus injustice or morality versus immorality. And that's where we are right now. The analogy I often use, as you know, is it's different if you are negotiating, should the fence be 6 feet or 8 feet? It's like, sure, compromise to 7 feet because who cares? Like there's not inherent morality to 6 or 8 feet. It's just a practical thing. That is not where we are with these entrenched leftists versus Trump. This is not a 6 foot versus 8 foot fence dispute. This is right versus wrong, good versus evil, justice versus injustice. And there is not only is there no virtue in compromise, it's actually weakness. It actually allows the other side to set the rules. And we should not play by their rules. Absolutely should not play by their rules. So it's not just USAID that Elon Musk is going after. He's about to go after 2 other federal agencies. This was announced during the Super Bowl last night by President Trump. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But let me ask you, are you being lied to? Wall Street insists that the only way to have enough money to retire is to put all your money, all your life savings into a 401k or an IRA and then essentially roll the dice in the Wall Street casino. But if this were true, what we're being told, then why do studies show that the average American following that advice will outlive their savings by 10 years? Yeah, 10 years. Even the man, by the way, who invented the 401k says it's a monster and it should be destroyed. It is time to get the truth and discover a better way to grow and protect your money. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative that banks and Wall Street desperately hope you do not hear about. It gives you guaranteed, predictable growth and retirement income. With Bank on Yourself, your plan doesn't go backwards when the markets tumble. Your principal and growth are locked in. That means tax-free retirement income. You know your tax rate in retirement? Zero under current tax law, which protects you from the coming tax tsunami. You are in control, which is the best part, in my opinion. You get access to your money for any reason, no questions asked. There are no government penalties or restrictions on how much you can take or when you can take it. And that's the best of both worlds. Try doing that with a 401k, by the way, or an IRA. You can't. You can get a free report that reveals how you can bank on yourself and enjoy tax-free retirement income, guaranteed growth, and control your money. Just go to bankonyourself.com/Liz. That's bankonyourself.com/Liz. Okay, last night during the Super Bowl, and we'll get to the Super Bowl in a couple of minutes, not as much juicy drama at the Super Bowl, at least politically, as there is sometimes, but a couple of things interesting happened. But during halftime, President Trump did an interview with Bret Baier over at Fox News, and he said that Elon Musk, he was going to give directions to Elon Musk, and this is one of my favorite things about Trump, by the way, is sometimes when he says these things publicly, you wonder if he's even notified the person that he's talking about yet. He said he was going to have Elon, sometime within the next 24 hours, he was going to give him directions to DOGE, the Department of Education, and the Pentagon. And I was like, did Elon hear about this first, or is he hearing about it just like at the same time as the rest of us are on national television? This would be this is going to be even more fun than USAID. USAID, don't get me wrong, one of the most fun political things that we've ever seen. But the Department of Education and the Pentagon, like the Pentagon is going to be more corrupt than USAID. That's just my prediction in advance. We are going to see not only billions and billions of dollars, you are going to be shocked and appalled at what your tax money is being spent on with the backing of the US military. So Pentagon, Department of Justice, that's coming up. But I had an additional thought about what's happening with DOGE. And my thought, we covered this a lot last week after everything that happened with Politico. Obviously, Politico was revealed to have been receiving money from US federal government agencies. The original report that we woke up to, I think it was on Wednesday, was that Politico had received $8 million from US federal government agencies. And that was shocking enough. But then the team at the Liz Wheeler Show broke the news early in the afternoon that it wasn't actually $8 million that Politico had received. It was $34.3 million that Politico was receiving, not just from USAID, but from a whole laundry list of corrupt government agencies, from Health and Human Services, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, the CDC, the FDA. Like, what? What are these agencies doing giving money to Politico? And their defense, of course, was, we're paying for subscriptions to a premier aspect of Politico called Politico Pro. And they attempted to justify this humongous amount of money that was being given to Politico as if it wasn't a payoff for Politico, which it was, clearly. Because when you zoom out on this isn't like, paying $100 a year to subscribe to blazetv.com/Liz, which y'all should do. No, we're not talking about $100 a year. We're talking $34.3 million. How can anybody in their right mind justify the government giving an ostensibly objective news organization $34.3 million? There's simply no explanation on the face of the earth that justifies it. If it is subscriptions, then it's called soft money laundering. Money's fungible. We're not always lucky enough to see an email that says $10,000 for the big guy or 10% for the big guy. We know that when money is given ostensibly for subscriptions, and it's a large part of the revenue of that organization is going to cater to their audience. It is going to cause them to write, at the very least, soft headlines, but more likely just blatant propaganda on behalf of those who are giving their money. And that's exactly what we've seen with Politico. That's what we covered last week. And it's a very big story, so much so that while we were breaking it, the White House, in the press conference, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt announced that no, Politico would no longer be getting that money for subscriptions. President Trump later addressed it and said, actually, it's more than just Politico. There are other New York Times, Associated Press, other media outlets that are also being given money, ostensibly under the guise of being subscriptions. And he said, that's over, that's done. And I want to give credit to you. I want to give you kudos. I actually think it's very important that we recognize why what we did last week happened. It wasn't just because we were nerding out on a government website and happened to find an instance of just blatant corruption and media collusion with the mainstream media, or media collusion with the federal government. It's because, and maybe you can thank Elon Musk for this and free speech on X, but it's because you raised your voice and drowned out the media, drowned out the swamp creatures, even some on the Republican side, who were trying to tell us that this story's just normal, it's no big deal, this is just how it goes in Washington, D.C., and you were like, this is how it goes. This is part of the problem. This is not how it goes anymore. Put a stop to this. And because you raised your voice, because you were loud, because you shared this story, because you didn't allow yourself to be deterred, our voices made their way to the White House and to President Trump. So every time you hear this story referenced, understand that you were not just a big part, not just a big part of it, but you were a critical part of it. Without your voice, what happened would never have happened. Which again, we talked about this before. This is one of the unique parts of the Trump administration this time around, is you and I play a very unique role, because it's not just a matter of, oh, raise your voices 2 weeks before the election or during the midterms or, once or twice a year when something big comes up in Congress. We have a very unique role to play in every intricacy of every activity and behavior and policy and strategy that's going on in this administration. And you guys have been killing it. And isn't it fun to keep winning like this? Also worth noting, 2 months ago before Christmas, when I was co-hosting with Glenn Beck down in Dallas, and we were talking to Chip Roy about raising the debt ceiling. I mean, the story of Washington, D.C., right? And it was an interesting and nuanced situation, because Donald Trump did not want there to be a limit on raising the debt ceiling. Chip Roy did. And I remember Glenn and I were on air, and we were talking and saying, well, Chip Roy is right in theory. We want less spending in our federal government. However, we're going to take President Trump's side on this, because we have been listening to politicians talking about putting a cap on the debt ceiling for a long time, and it hasn't actually resulted in fiscal conservatism. So while their heart is in the right place, their intention is in the right place, their strategy for carrying that out has never been effective. So let's allow Trump to try something new. Let's allow him to try to use DOGE to achieve fiscal conservatism, or at least just financial accountability for the abuse in government. And I'd like to follow up on that point that we were making. So the point of that is, Trump is often castigated as not being fiscally conservative because he does spend a lot of money, and because he doesn't take the, I guess, Paul Ryan style fiscal conservative policy positions. But I think it's important to note that there is a big difference between cutting a line item from whether it's an agency, whether it's a budget, and then having that line item come up every year or simply be reversed by the next administration, versus what Trump is doing, which I would argue is actually more valuable than line item fiscal conservatism, because he is dismantling the apparatus that even allows for that money to be spent in the first place, which means that not only, you can see what he's done, what Elon Musk has done at USAID, not only is he actually saving taxpayers more money than any Republican politician I can ever remember, certainly in my lifetime, he's taking apart, dismantling the administrative state apparatus that allows this money to be spent in the first place. So God forbid a radical leftist president takes office sometime in the future, they can't just with the swipe of their pen sign that spending back into being, because the apparatus is gone. So the point of this is, the point is to say we were right. The point is to say Donald Trump is actually more fiscally conservative than some of the fiscal conservative hawks. Not Chip Roy. I love Chip Roy. He's great. He's one of my favorite members of Congress. But I'm talking more about the Paul Ryan type critics. He actually is more fiscally conservative than some of these members of Congress who claim to be fiscally conservative. And it's because he is rewriting the norm. He's rewriting the norm. Jen Psaki, I don't know if you guys ever watch her on MSNBC, but man, get a bowl of popcorn, because she is a hoot. She uses this word all the time on her show because she's apoplectic over the Trump administration, of course. She says, it's just unprecedented. It's unprecedented. And I was like, yeah, because we're tired of the precedented. It doesn't work for us. It's abusive. Every time you say unprecedented, I cheer. I'm like, yes, exactly. Something new. Do it a new way, because the old way is terrible. The old way is absolutely terrible. Okay, Super Bowl. Did you guys watch the Super Bowl? I did, but I will tell you the best way to watch the Super Bowl is actually on the West Coast, because you can watch it. It starts at 3 o'clock or 3:30, so you're done by 7:30 instead of it being long into the night. I happen to be out here in San Diego, California, and it is the best way to watch the Super Bowl. It was on. There are a couple of political takeaways from the Super Bowl, as well as the best commercial. I didn't think the commercials were very good. You can hit me up in the live chat if you think that I'm wrong on this. If there was a commercial that I missed while I was eating chips and salsa, which is what I basically spent the afternoon doing. But I didn't think that ads were very good one way or the other. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, the Super Bowl. Here's my takeaway, and this is not the most interesting Super Bowl. I remember one year, I don't remember what year this was. One year, the Super Bowl ads were so bad, we had to do an entire episode the next day on picking apart exactly how woke and dreadful they were. That is not the case this year. The takeaway is actually that, like, the commercials weren't as woke as usual. I mean, I think Nike's was a little, like, feminist, women oppressed, stupid stuff, which isn't true, but, like, they weren't, like, outright offensive unless there was one that I missed. Did you see the Secret Service recruiting ad that the Trump administration ran? That was actually, like, chilling. It was patriotic. It was inspiring. That one was good. That's about it when it comes to the ads. Those of you who are eagerly awaiting for our Super Bowl takeaways are going to be disappointed because they also didn't show Taylor Swift as much as they did last year. Like, didn't they show Taylor Swift last year? I hardly even need to explain this. She's dating Travis Kelce of the Chiefs. They showed her every other second at the Super Bowl last year, like her reaction to every play, which some found annoying. Let's just say that. Some didn't like that. I don't know if I minded it. I kind of probably like celebrity gossip more than football. Don't hate me. But the mood of the nation has changed because the couple of times that Taylor Swift was shown, when she was shown on the Jumbotron, she was booed. And then the Jumbotron switched to Trump and the crowd cheered. That's pretty different, even in just the space of a year. I don't think that would have happened a year ago. There's also a pretty big contrast between the Colin Kaepernick era wokeness, the kneeling for the flag, socks that portrayed police officers as pigs. There's a pretty big difference between that era of the NFL and this era. The Chiefs' defensive tackle, Chris Jones, did you see what he did before the game started? He deliberately went over and shook President Trump's hand, went out of his way to go over and shake President Trump's hand, which, again, can you imagine being an open Republican and open Trump supporter back in like 2015, 2016, 2017? Would not have happened. And then the head coach of the Eagles, the Super Bowl winning team, the head coach and the MVP, the quarterback, Jalen Hurts, the first comments out of their mouth after they won the game was to give all credit to Jesus. And I was like, what? What? They thanked God after the game. This is like American football. They're restoring it to what it should be. So I'm sorry, that's my only takeaway. There's not like I said, maybe Nike's ad, but I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't even see Nike's ad live. Someone texted me about it and they weren't outraged enough for me to look it up. They were just like, oh, did you see Nike's ad? And I was like, no, what wasn't? They were like, kind of feministy. And I was like, okay, terrible. Don't buy Nike. Okay. During the game, this was actually more interesting from a political standpoint. President Trump killed the penny. Yeah, the penny. He said, we're not going to, actually, this is his quote. Let me read it to you. He said, this is what he posted on Truth Social. He said, for far too long, the United States has minted pennies, which literally cost us more than 2 cents. This is so wasteful. I have instructed my Secretary of the U.S. Treasury to stop producing new pennies. Let's rip the waste out of our great nation's budget, even if it's a penny at a time. I am so interested in your take on this. I am so interested in how you feel about there being no new pennies in the United States. Please tell me, do you think that this is awesome because he's so serious about saving money that he's going to stop minting a penny just for nostalgia's sake? You know, that's why we mint pennies. Or do you think that this is tragic because we are no longer going to have, Abe Lincoln? I don't know how I feel about this. You can tell me how to feel about this. I don't know. I mean, I obviously am a little bit of a penny pincher. I guess not. You can't even call it that anymore. What are you supposed to call being cheap then? How much do you think pennies are going to be worth now? Like, are we all going to actually hoard our pennies? Oh, these puns are just coming. I didn't even plan that, any of them. How much are pennies going to be worth now? If it's up to supply and demand and we're not making them anymore, then maybe in like 20 years, if we have little banks, like little piggy banks stuffed with pennies. I had this one when I was a kid that was like a crayon. It was like this gigantic Crayola crayon and it was stuffed with pennies. All the time my dad would come home with change in his pocket and he would not give me the change, but I'd be like, can I do a chore and get your change? And then I'd stuff it in my piggy bank. But how much do you think that's going to be worth if we don't have pennies anymore? You tell me what you think of this. You tell me what you think of this. Okay, and this is the most unpopular topic that I ever talk about. I lose an untold number of followers. You guys run away as fast as you can from me when I talk about this topic, but it's not going to stop me. It's not going to stop me because there's scientific evidence that show that I am right. It's just, you're going to have to get used to it. I'm right on this. Are you ready? There's a new study that shows that overuse of high-potency cannabis could be linked to a sharp increase of schizophrenia cases in Canada. This is according to a new study. The study was published in the journal JAMA Network Open, and it found that the number of new schizophrenia cases, don't even think about hitting unsubscribe. I can see some of you right now hitting unsubscribe. Listen to what I'm saying here. The number of new schizophrenia cases linked to cannabis use disorder, it's called CUD, has more than doubled in Ontario, rising from 4% to 10% after the legalization of the drug. Researchers assessed whether the liberalization of medical cannabis in 2015 and the legalization of non-medical cannabis in 2018 influenced the link between cannabis use disorder and new schizophrenia diagnosis. Previous studies, and we've talked about these, have suggested cannabis abuse may aggravate already decreasing nerve connectivity in young adults at risk of psychosis, which could progress to schizophrenia. Okay, so it's not that I enjoy being right about this story. It's not that I'm trying to prove a point. It's that I actually think that this is one of the, maybe Maha will pick this up, right? Maybe this will become a Maha topic, or maybe not. Maybe aren't some of these Maha people very into the psychedelics and stuff. I think this is one of the most underreported tragedies that happens across our country. I'm not trying to shame potheads, or, a lot of people are going to be commenting right now and saying, okay, how is this different than alcohol? Or I've smoked pot since I was 15 and I'm fine. I'm not going psychotic. Okay, that's fine. And I'm glad that you're not. But if studies show that it increases the chance of a young man getting schizophrenia by fourfold, and there are studies that do, that it leads to an increase in violence and is even correlated to homicide, don't you think that's something that we should be discussing as a nation as we are doing this cleanse of bad influences in our nation? And when we are talking about what should be legal and illegal, and then talking about what's moral and immoral, what's ordered and disordered, what's constitutional and chaotic, don't you think we should be talking about this? And I would challenge those of you who don't want to think about this, because you may feel personally triggered by it, and that's fine. Think about this. Like, take a moment and say, is there something that I have missed? Is this something that is affecting especially young men in our nation? Young men who have a higher rate of suicide and depression, and young women who have a higher rate of being on antidepressant, anti-anxiety medications. Is this a contributing factor? And if it is, then we can question, okay, then what should be done about it? But I challenge you to say, if you have a preconceived bias against hearing this story or hearing me talk about this, see if you can put that aside and then tell me what you think of this, instead of just, I expect the 1,000 of emails that I know that I'm going to get from you guys. And I do read most of them until I get tired of reading the same thing. But I'm actually interested to see, like, if this doesn't convince you that cannabis is a problem, actually, this is the question I want to ask you. If this doesn't convince you that cannabis is a problem, then what would? Would it have to be your own personal experience? Like, oh, you wouldn't believe that cannabis is linked to schizophrenia and psychosis and violence unless it happened to you? Or unless you happen to personally know someone that it happened to? Are you not going to believe evidence unless it's actually anecdotal? Or at what point would you believe evidence? That's the question I want to ask. So anything else any other feedback, like, answer me that question. I'm very sincerely curious. Okay. What do we have next? Oh, air traffic controllers. Okay, this is interesting. So we haven't done our deep dive into aviation safety yet because, well, to be transparent, we had a really good guest last week who then couldn't do it, and we didn't want to cover the topic without him, so we're just waiting to get that scheduled. But the leading theory on what happened in that plane crash where the military helicopter ran into the American Airlines jet outside of Washington, D.C., outside of Washington Reagan Airport, was that it was a confluence of, bad scenarios, that maybe the pilot of the helicopter, the Black Hawk, confused the lights of the airliner with the lights of the building, and it wasn't DEI involved. Even pilots that I know and trust, military pilots that I know and trust, have been telling me, I think it was just like all the bad things happened to happen at once. And I confess to you, I've been having a hard time accepting that theory, even though I trust these pilots, because I'm not suggesting that, like, we talked about this last week with DEI. DEI is not just like, oh, look at this person, is it a man or a woman, or are they black or white or whatever. It's not an individual thing. DEI means the standards were somehow lowered as a whole because of an effort to increase diversity for the sake of diversity itself. They wanted different people to pass their tests. And so you could be a literal white man and still be of lesser skill because of DEI standards. So it's not like a looking for token hires type of things. And that's, I think, how DEI would apply to this airliner crash situation. It's not necessarily that these individuals on the planes or the air traffic controllers were DEI hires. It's that when you change the entrance exams for air traffic controllers, well, it lowers the standards, right? There were reportedly 1,000 qualified air traffic controllers that were turned away. I think it was 2015, 2018. Not during the Trump administration, so I guess it wasn't 2018, because they were too white or some ridiculous racist nonsense like that. So that's the point about DEI, but I've been having a little bit of a hard time just accepting this idea that it was just this confluence of bad events, because we've had 150 million domestic commercial flights in the United States since our last airliner crash in Buffalo, New York, back in, 2009? So surely at some point in those 150 million flights, there was also a confluence of bad factors that could lead to a crash, and yet it didn't. And so something else must have happened. If our process is so foolproof, our system of aviation safety is so foolproof that it takes into account human error and confusion and like the chances of a bad scenario happening, then there must have been something that was changed. And so there's this interesting article published by Just the News that said current and former air traffic controllers warn that the FAA's hiring practices and so-called immunity program have led to problems, such as those that may have resulted in the recent mid-air collision near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. The FAA's focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion hiring practices have resulted in the employment of less qualified air traffic controllers and staffing shortages, former ATCs say. This, in addition to an immunity program that fails to hold ATCs accountable, that's air traffic controllers, by the way, for their mistakes, are likely contributing factors. American Airlines plane collided with a military helicopter on January 9th that resulted in, the 67 people aboard dying. So this is my question to you about this story. This is the first that I have heard of an immunity program for air traffic controllers. I've heard of the DEI standards. I've heard of this diversity push. I've seen the job postings where they say they want people with severe psychiatric disabilities to apply to be an air traffic controller. Like, what? That's so bananas. I've heard of the standards, the Biden standards, or Biden lowering the standards. I've heard about the 1,000 air traffic controllers that were turned away because they were too white. I have not yet heard of this immunity program that failed to hold air traffic controllers accountable for their mistakes. So my question to you is this: if you are a pilot, if you are a flight attendant, if you are an airline or airport employee, if you have worked as an air traffic controller, if you have simply worked in a building with air traffic controllers, if you are part of the FAA, if you are part of any work that is tangentially associated with this immunity program, please reach out to me. Please send me an email. Please notify me on X. Please reach out to me through the Blaze. I want to talk to you about this immunity program, because this might be the piece that we are missing from this puzzle. It just doesn't make sense that out of all the flights that we have done in all the years that we've been alive, that there's never been another scenario where all the factors were bad and it led to a crash until now. There's something that's still missing from this story, and maybe the immunity program is part of this. So if you know anything about this and you have firsthand experience with this, please reach out to me. That would be greatly appreciated. All right, guys, we are out of time for today. We have some great stories for you. We're gonna have to save them for tomorrow. But there's a big sea change happening on college campuses across the nation. Colleges that used to be very, very leftist, we're talking like the epitome of woke, like where woke was born, are now punishing students for being too woke. We're gonna talk about that tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe. Go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. Go to x.com/Liz_Wheeler. Go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Search The Liz Wheeler Show, subscribe, and make sure you give us a 5-star review so that we are boosted in the algorithm. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.